Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here today. We're really excited to have your participation in this event. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce briefly the agenda for the next 2 days and then hand it over to some of our keynote speakers. And again, I'm the principal investigator for this project, which is the Integrated Urban Services Project. Next slide, please. I will not go through this agenda in detail, but I did want to give you a snapshot of what we have on deck for the next 2 hours. And wanted to let you know that our focus over the next 2 days is to talk about the motivations for the Integrated Urban Services Project, and specifically the challenges, perspectives, and other regional and international insights that can be brought into the intersection of energy, water, food systems, and how we can address these in cities specifically. I wanted to also remind you, since it is a 2-day event, you will need to register for both days. If you have not done so already, please contact us and we can provide you the information to do so. But the second day of the event, if you want to go to the next slide, Isabel, will be August 13th from 7 to 9 a.m. Jakarta time, or August 12th from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And again, our goal is to educate and engage cities as well as stakeholders in the region on the needs and priorities for energy, water, food systems in cities. One final note, we do have the packed agenda. We will not be going into detailed biographical information for our speakers, but that has been emailed out to everyone. So we suggest that you refer to that. Otherwise, we will be providing just brief introductions for all of our speakers this evening. And with that, I would like to turn it over, if you go to the next slide, please, to Bill Flins, who is the Director of the Office of Multilateral Affairs, Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs from the U.S. State Department. Bill?
Thank you, Jennifer. And good morning to all of our friends in Asia, and good evening to everyone in the U.S. and elsewhere. Very happy to welcome you to this launch event. My name is William Flins. I'm the Director of the Office of Multilateral Affairs in the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. And my office has the privilege of being home to the US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership. And it is a distinct pleasure to be with you this evening to launch the new Integrated Urban Services Program as part of the US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership. I'd like to tell you a little bit about that partnership. The US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership is a key component of our efforts to demonstrate the US commitment to ASEAN and its central role at the heart of the Indo-Pacific. The US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership harnesses US public and private sector expertise to meet the challenges of rapid urbanization. Above all, it seeks to improve the quality of life for the people of Southeast Asia, especially in the 26 participating cities of the ASEAN Smart Cities Network. We bring knowledge, innovation, city partnerships, and private sector resources to ASEAN to advance urban policy, planning, and technologies. Our goal is to strengthen sustainability and enhance the resiliencies of cities. The US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership takes a whole of government approach, working with over 16 US government agencies, along with our regional embassies and partners. The United States has committed over $13 million in approximately 23 projects. These projects cover broad urban challenges in the fields of transportation, water, resource recovery, research and innovation, energy, health, and cybersecurity, among others. We think this work is especially timely and relevant. ASEAN cities are experiencing some of the fastest rates of urbanization in the world, creating new demands and stresses on basic systems. Many cities in the ASEAN region are struggling to provide adequate drinking water, sanitation, waste management, flood control, electricity, and food security, while demand for these basic services from industry, agricultural and residents have only increased over the years. Today, we are launching a new program entitled the Integrated Urban Services Program in collaboration with our partners at the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, or NREL, and the State Department's Bureau of Oceans, Environment, and Science to help our ASEAN partner cities build resilience in their energy, water, and food systems. The Integrated Urban Services Program aims to promote resource recovery and reuse through better cooperation and integration among the water, energy, and food sectors. The program also strengthens our commitment to climate change and green economic recovery by bringing innovation to the design and delivery of these critical urban services. Private sector engagement is an integral pillar of the US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership and forms an important part of the Integrated Urban Services Program. We are collaborating with the US Department of Commerce and the US-ASEAN Business Council to identify key businesses with the expertise, regional focus, and forward thinking to help advance smart and sustainable cities across all of ASEAN. As part of the Integrated Urban Services Program, we have established a multi-sectoral experts group and are privileged to have participation from firms such as Jacobs Engineering, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill Architects, the American Insurance Group, as well as the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, Oakland's East Bay Municipal Utility District, as well as our ally Japan through the University of Tokyo, among others. This program also aligns well with ASEAN Chair Brunei's focus on the circular economy and on addressing climate mitigation and adaptation. We hope that ASEAN cities embrace this innovative program and apply to become one of 2 pilot cities that the US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership and NREL will be supporting. Again, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. I wish you all a very productive 2 days of discussions, and I look forward to hearing the outcomes of these proceedings. And I look forward also to stronger collaboration with ASEAN cities as we chart together a more sustainable quality of life for all. So please allow me to turn the floor now to Dr. Jill Engel-Cox, the Director of the Joint Institute of Strategic Energy Analysis at NREL. Dr. Engel-Cox.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Welcome, everyone. Very happy to be here. My name is Jill Engel-Cox, and I'm the Director of the Joint Institute for Strategic Energy Analysis at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So first off, I want to say how delighted I am to be asked to be part of this workshop to kick off this partnership and collaboration. Integrated urban services could not be more important now as we face a growing climate change challenge and other environmental challenges, while at the same time addressing human needs, especially in urban areas. I believe the cities in Asia and the US are critical for developing solutions that address climate holistically, including energy, water, food, and the diverse natural environment that they live in. So I'm going to spend about a few minutes just talking a little bit about NREL and JICEA and our work in order to illustrate the complete span of this very important topic. And then I'd like to end on a very brief personal note. So to go to the next slide, a little bit about the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We are located in the state of Colorado, right in the middle western part of the United States, and have about 3,000 employees and a campus that studies a wide variety of renewable energy technologies that you can see listed here. One of the key things that we have also done is realize that renewable energy does not, and energy in general does not just connect to itself. It needs to be developed in connection with the environment that it is placed in, with water, with land, with food, as well as the cities and the cultures that is developed in. So if you go to the next slide, one of the programs that we've established is the Joint Institute for Strategic Energy Analysis. And JCEA was set up about 11 years ago in order to look at the linkages between sustainability, economic prosperity, and resilience, and to look at these as a combination of different systems, including industry, supply chains, power systems, ecosystems, and of course our human systems that we all live in. And to do this on a global scale, and then and different countries and regions throughout the world. So this program that we're launching today really well aligns with NREL's mission and with JCEA's objectives. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about why energy, water, food is so important, so central to sustainability. So while our initial focus is on energy, water is critical to that energy. So you need water to generate energy, to create thermal plants, and to operate energy systems. At the same time, you need energy to extract, treat, and distribute drinking water, especially if you're looking at desalination or those types of drinking water systems. That energy also needs land. It needs land to produce that energy. You need land for solar, you need land for wind, for biofuels, and many of the traditional fuels take up different types of land spaces as well. And then that energy, at the same time, uses that land, is needed to produce food and for food production and transportation of that food to our urban areas. And then finally, of course, there's a link between water and food, where water is needed to grow crops and livestock, and land use decisions around agriculture affect our water quality. So you cannot have sustainability by thinking of these in silos. You need to think of all these three components together. So if you go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about how you need to think about each of these holistically. So as you're going through the workshop of the next 2 days or over the 2 days, think about energy, particularly clean energy, renewable energy, as well as including the power systems, solar, wind, water, geothermal, and many others, but also how they link to transportation and the fuels for transportation. And then also how that links to the buildings in the cities and urban areas, and links to the industries such as manufacturing that are located in those urban areas. And then finally, think about how energy systems integrate through the grid and to a variety of different systems together, and then the security and resilience of those systems. So go to the next slide. It's also important to think about water and all the different aspects of the water systems to consider. So we need to do the modeling and analysis to understand the performance and how they work together. We need to understand how water intersects with the grid, different types of water treatment and filtration systems, including desalination. You need to validate those technologies. As we develop new technologies, we need to validate them on how they will work individually, as well as how they work with these other systems. And then how do decision makers, how do policymakers make decisions about which types of energy and which types of water and other systems will be incorporated. And if we go to the next slide, talk very briefly about food and how important it is, and how we're looking at different ways you can integrate food systems and energy. So there's agrivoltaics, where you're growing crops under solar panels in order to conserve land. So you're not taking up the land to produce energy with solar, but you're actually growing different types of crops under solar or wind. And then also provides multiple income stream for farmers. You can look at controlled environment agriculture, so greenhouses to reduce water use that are useful for both urban and rural agriculture. And then floating solar, which is a way to conserve our water, reduce water evaporation, as well as produce energy when you have restricted land space. So to go to the next slide, I know that was a very brief overview of kind of the technologies, but we also need to think about them in the context of sustainable cities and communities. And since you'll each get all of these slides, I won't go through all of these. These are some of the models that we do that look at state and local planning for energy and transportation, how you can work with large cities, very large cities, in this case, Los Angeles, but other cities we've worked with to plan their energy goals that meet air quality, water, food, grid integration, and transportation. How you can do this for different income types in different neighborhoods, and then how that links to, again, links to our transportation systems to move goods, services, people around in our urban areas. So all of these things, all of our energy systems need to be done in the context of cities and communities, which is what this program is all about. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to end on a personal note. I lived in Kuala Lumpur for several years. And while I was there, I worked with many energy companies on energy issues. And we looked at solar and biofuels and carbon management and how they could be developed sustainably and beneficially. I spent time visiting Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Brunei, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, Philippines, Vietnam, everywhere. And I know that those cities and your cities have the capability to address the simultaneous challenges of energy, water, food, transportation, industry, and economy, while at the same time preserving that fabulous and diverse environment in the region that's essential for clean water, clean health, clean air. So the Asian cities can be, you all can be leaders in developing these smart cities, and we're very excited to partner with you through this exciting initiative. So I will now turn it over to Jeff Gingrich, who will help us get started on the first panel presentation. And good luck with the workshop, and we're looking forward to the engagement throughout the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, and so now we're going to turn it over to our IUS project team, starting with Helen Santiago Fink, the program manager for the US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership. Helen?
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to Jill. Yes, it is my honor to be the program manager for the US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership, and allow me to provide a purview to some of the topics that will be addressed over the course of these 2 days. Let's start with a fundamental question. What is a smart city? Understanding that all cities are unique, yet a smart city is one that evolves to optimize its resources, to optimize its human resources as well as its energy resources, and to create operational efficiencies to improve quality of life for all of its citizens. A smart city of today must be a smart, sustainable city. It is a city that embraces systems thinking and comprehensive urban planning to make innovative solutions beyond simply technological applications, but also to address the challenges of all sectors and service needs. It's an opportunity to address social, economic, and environmental needs simultaneously, and to be able to move towards addressing the challenges both globally and regionally of today. The Smart Cities, the US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership focuses aligned with the ASEAN Smart Cities Framework developed in 2018, and the goals of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, as well as the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanization Strategy. Next slide, please. The new city context is one that looks at the Sustainable Development Goals, we knowing that cities are a microcosm of global challenges. And it is one that cities need to address issues from poverty to climate change, as well as addressing issues critical of our critical urban services, those being water, energy, and food. Smart, sustainable cities conserve energy, mitigate greenhouse gases, and ensure resiliency of its critical urban services. Such thinking was recently reinforced in the East Asia Summit and the Statement on Sustainable and Energy and Green Recovery, outlining that sustainable practices such as nature-based solutions, low carbon development, and more circular economy approaches are needed to support both economic growth and long-term climate goals. Next slide, please. The tools that are available for a smart, sustainable city are multifaceted. Comprehensive urban planning is fundamental. Land use and spatial orientation of jobs, homes, services can drive investments in significant infrastructure, such as transport, that then will determine the sustainability of that city. It will also determine the risks that city must confront in regards to climate change. And the region of Southeast Asia as you all know very well, is very prone to flooding. And that flooding and sea level rise, unfortunately, will only exacerbate over time unless we put in the measures that are critical. So we are looking at a variety of tools that start with planning, policy, underpinned by technology, but also beyond technological applications per se, looking at nature-based solutions and looking at a combination of many of them to be able to get to the level of smart sustainability in our cities. The US is committed to, next slide, please. The US is committed to smart, sustainable cities. As has been said, we have committed since 2018, $13 million in over 23 projects throughout the region. We're largely focused on water management, vested in urban mobility. We have a program in health and cities, and we are launching today this timely project in terms of looking at systems integration for resource recovery and reuse. The private sector is a key partner in this undertaking, and we are working very closely together with our research institutions. Research and innovation is critical to be able to find those solutions that have yet to be uncovered and provide us the necessary tools and the necessary structures to be able to address the challenges of our urban environment. We have an interesting 5 research projects currently happening in the region right now, looking at distributed data sharing and fast response to be able to address issues of flooding in Ho Chi Minh City. We are also looking to modernize cities, working through the natural capital that city has to offer and provide smart garden alleys to be able to provide, both incorporate the natural capital, sensors and machine learning to be able to provide better urban planning and to serve the needs of those cities. Next slide, please. Here is a snapshot of some of the programming we have to date. We would like to increase, and we plan to increase our activities in the main countries, as well as throughout the ASEAN region. And we are in collaboration with dialogue partners such as Japan and the Republic of Korea in this respect. A preview to another regional project that will be actually launching next month in September, and I will put it in the chat for the sake of time, will be the third country training program that we have with Singapore, addressing plastic pollution through integrated waste management strategies and circular economic models. And the registration will be found in the chat momentarily. Next slide, please. And here we are today. You will hear much more about this program. I just want to thank the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia that actually did pioneering similar work between 2013 and 2019 in terms of looking at integrated resource management and urban nexus, and we aim to learn and build upon these experiences. Next slide, please. The circular economy provides tremendous social, economic, and ecological opportunities for our cities, clearly in the food sector, but in other sectors, including e-waste. Just think of also solar panels in terms of the repurposing and the decommissioning of those, chemicals, textiles, plastics, capital equipment, and many more. The opportunities are before us. The technologies and the innovations are being developed as we speak. Next slide, please. And allow me to conclude by saying smart and sustainable cities create resource, inclusive and healthy communities and are underpinned by multi-sectoral and multidisciplinary collaboration and support long-term and need the support of long-term political commitment for the sustainability of our urban environments. With that, thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thank you, Helen. Hi, everyone, this is Jennifer Daw again. I will be providing an overview now of the Integrated Services Program. If you could go to the next slide, please. So a quick program overview. I know Helen has provided a lot of foundational information for us here on the motivations around the program itself. This is a 3-year project, which was funded by State Department and will be led by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And the goal is to demonstrate socioeconomic value as well as the benefits of resource recovery and reuse in urban environments. This is a really exciting new perspective that we're hoping to bring to cities in the ASEAN region using market-based approaches and peer learning. And there's a web link at the bottom of this slide that I would encourage you to take a look at in the future. I also want to note that we will be sharing all the materials from this workshop after the event. Some will be posted on the website and we'll also be distributing over email. Next slide, please. I wanted to show a quick snapshot of our project team. You will be hearing from many of these folks today and on the second day of the workshop, and we all bring a range of regional and technical expertise that pertains to the topic of this project. Next slide, please. The project itself has 3 key phases over the 3-year period. The project began in January of 2021 with a focus on engagement. Over the next 2 years, we will be working closely with 2 pilot cities on capacity building, and we will also be sharing through peer learning activities. If you want to go to the next slide. So a key activity for us has been to establish an experts group. These are a range of internationally recognized experts on a wide range of topics such as private sector, academia, and government. And we'd like to acknowledge and thank all of them for their participation in the project thus far and moving forward. Their role is to provide expertise and insights to inform the work that we're doing. We're meeting quarterly with these experts, and they're also reviewing many of the materials that we develop to ensure their relevance. We also have a community of practice that we have established as part of this project. And these are individuals or organizations that are more on the periphery, that have activities that are ongoing, which are relevant to our work. And these are entities or individuals that are interested in staying informed and engaged about our work. If you would like to be included in our community of practice, please contact us. Our information is below. Next slide, please. The next key activity for us is capacity building, and this is a large focus of the project itself, which is providing technical assistance for 2 pilot cities in the ASEAN region to help address their energy, water, food system challenges, with an ultimate goal of creating business plans and engaging private sector to devise actionable solutions. The technical assistance that may be provided could include technology solutions, procurement, modeling, analysis, informing policy decisions, and business planning. And if you go to the next slide. So on the second day of the workshop, we will be sharing more information on the application process for the pilot cities. But part of the purpose of this workshop is to share information about the fact that we're doing this work and to encourage you to apply. We will be accepting applications through the end of October 25th of this year. And applications will be opening towards the end of the month of August. So we will be, now that you have participated in this event, we will be sharing more information with you on the process, but this is an opportunity for cities to work with other partners to identify actionable steps that can address some of their energy, water, and food system challenges. We go to the next slide, please. A final component of this project is the peer learning. And this will be both sharing information that we're learning as part of the work that we're conducting with the pilot cities, as well as peer-to-peer exchange. And the ultimate goal here is to help to scale the solutions that we are identifying around energy, water, and food systems. So this will be something that we'll be rolling out over the next 1.5 years or so of the project. And again, if you're interested in continuing to be informed and involved, we encourage you to join our community of practice so we can engage you throughout these efforts. All right, and with that, thank you. I will turn it over to Dr. Josh Sperling from NREL. Thank you.
Hi there, thank you so much, Jennifer, and to our previous speakers and to all of our attendees. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you and to go before a wonderful group of speakers next. So I'll try to briefly touch on some fundamentals of our plans around urbanization and addressing the nexus. Next slide, please. So as an initial thought exercise, we know there's a lot of urbanization and growing population in ASEAN. We also know there's a lack of basic services. And while these numbers may be outdated from a 2012 source, and we might be further along now, there's still a significant opportunity just with wastewater as a form of keeping our citizens healthy and improving our environment. And on the right here is an example of our Department of Energy leading a report and workshop around the future of what wastewater treatment could look like when we think of it more of an integrated energy, water, wastewater system and recovering resources. Next slide, please. So I'll just offer three key messages to start. We're really looking at these interdependencies across sectors in rapidly urbanizing contexts. We want to present ways to inspire and promote new leadership from these cities and partner with them in improving opportunities for quality of life, as well as access to better services. And with an important focus on underserved communities that are at risk to some of what's been mentioned already of pollution, rising sea levels, flood risk, extreme heat, and so on. So the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, were brought up after the Millennium Development Goals. Energy, cities, and climate all came about in this latest round as key areas for action. And perhaps this type of program can inform our next set of goals in the future. I think this could really be a pioneering opportunity to bring together goals as well as identify what are the gaps in how we approach integrated urban services. And just as a visual example here on the other side, you see the high-rise, affluent, well-to-do, and next to more lower income informal settlements. And I think an important part of smart cities that we are interested to advance is not smart cities only for the wealthy, the affluent, but for all in our cities and even outside of our cities. Next slide, please. So many interdependencies that have been touched on. I won't go into detail here other than saying there's a lot of interdependent feedbacks, and our use of energy is causing climate change. And IPCC International Panel on Climate Change report came out just recently highlighting the latest. Climate is exacerbating current water stresses and has implications for all of our services being provided reliably. We have declining water availability that could limit and already is limiting food and energy choices. And our choices around energy transitions to mitigate climate change could also pose new risks. And I'll give an example that brings in transportation. If in the US, in the more water-constrained, rapid population growth areas of the Southwest, if we switched all to electric vehicles today with our current electric power grid, we could use twice as much water for every mile traveled or kilometer traveled on a life cycle basis if we did not clean up our grid quickly. So moving to less water-intensive energy generation is an example here of interdependent challenges to consider. Next slide, please. I won't go into much detail here other than just saying there's a growing market of opportunity to solve these problems in new ways and increased recognition of the nexus playing out in urban contexts. Next slide, please. Here's a little tale I'll share of urbanization from 1980. You can flip through every 3 seconds here, Isabel. We had about 4 mega cities in 1980, 10 in 1990. So we're adding about 6 mega cities every decade. 2010 at 21 cities, and now heading towards about 29 cities that are hosting about 10 million in population or more. And you'll see the blue lines here are representing Asia as a really important location for where this rapid urbanization and very large demand centers are, where they exist in the world. And while there's just a couple in ASEAN right now, I expect this will continue to change and shift. And what's maybe most important from this slide is that we're not only interested in megacities, they represent only 10% of the world's urban population. Smaller cities under 1 million that are also rapidly adding population represent over 60% of the world's urban population. Next slide, please. So just we're in an age of new megacities being added quickly. And you'll see in the top left here, Southeast Asia and East Asia are really a rapid growth location for urban populations. This will shift to Africa over the next decade, and a real opportunity and set of challenges we'll need to be addressing. Population growth rates happening at paces that will double our populations in 20, 30 to 40-year periods. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's ASEAN, and I put in blue just the sizes of these different cities and the level of urbanization. There's still a lot of opportunity for urbanization in this region. And I think a common interest here is our humanity, that we're all connected. We all rely on a daily basis on having food, clean water, electricity, and the security of these resources, and our common future sustainable development, development that meets the needs of today without compromising the needs of future generations will increasingly depend on how we make decisions in cities and plan for the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so why focus on the urban nexus? We know more and more populations moving to urban areas. There's rising consumption as people become more affluent living in cities over generations. And the idea around different levels working together to influence urbanization and moving towards nexus as an important area is really critical to our future. So the bottom right, US-centric, we want to be competitive in the global economy. We want to be environmentally responsible. We also want to promote human development and stability around the world. And many ways of using circular economy, regenerative approaches that can get us to move from a world of scarcity to perhaps more abundance of resources and capital. Next slide, please. Okay, so Helen touched on this. The Urban Nexus is a program that the UN and German government and others invested in. There's also been other programs like the Asian Cities Climate Change Resilience Network, the 100 Resilient Cities, Rockefeller Foundation, both funded those with a lot of emphasis on resilience. In Southeast Asia, there's also been a Sustainable Urbanization Global Initiative focused on food, energy, water. We don't want to reinvent the wheel with this project, but we want to build on these great foundations and even existing case studies of innovation that have been technology as well as people-centric, and how we bring sectors of local government, utilities, water, energy, waste, and so on together. I won't go into these specific case studies, but there is a report and paper I'm happy to share if folks are interested. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little background on myself. I started after undergrad going to a global design and engineering firm, working with a team called Integrated Urbanism. We focused on each of these key words where energy, water, food's a part of it. I don't think at that time, over a decade ago, we had the language of urban nexus, but I think the approach of integrated design, synergies between systems, sectors, disciplines, leading to more successful outcomes has been a part of our language. This urban nexus thinking, I think, is really driving forward a great ecosystem to accelerate access to services and increase our quality of service provision and quality of life within a global ecosystem of trying to create sustainability. Next slide, please. So after being in the private sector, I was very interested in moving towards a more analytical and rigorous approach to evaluating what's successful with our planning and design of cities. Did a PhD program in sustainable urban infrastructure, actually with the program director being a next speaker here, Anu. And we had success in creating a network on sustainable cities around the energy, water, climate nexus. And more recently, our NREL team has been part of this City as a Lab international consortium looking at the few nexus for sustainable, resilient urban development. I'll just say from these networks, equity and inequality has been an important focus. And we looked at the sustainable development goals in terms of what metrics and indicators are used and could be used across all cities globally, what's universal versus maybe more locally appropriate. Next slide, please.
Hey, Josh, we've got about 1 minute left.
Okay, so quickly here, I grew up in New York City, went to public school number 11. This might be my own personal, similar to Jill, and love cities. I would say creating an approach at NREL has been a real joy and pleasure. We came up with this visual. I won't describe in detail, but it's a process. If you go to the next slide, we start with people. How is it connected to energy? And if we ran out or our energy supply or power outages happened, we'd lose access to cleaning our water, providing food that's refrigerated, moving people and goods, communicating, making goods, and managing waste. So I think a lot of important scales at which we can address these types of issues. You could also think about how do we provide all these urban services with 100% clean energy, renewable energy going forward. Many case studies, Caribou is an example that Department of Energy is invested in as a mobile unit. I put a picture here at the bottom right of something I did in my first year engineering program where we collected waste grease from the cafeterias at the dining halls and showed the possibility of running our buses on waste vegetable oil and showing a mobile unit for renewable energy, alternative fuel education, and with ideas around greenhouses and mobile water, wastewater treatment. I know we're short on time. I will end here and look forward to joining you again tomorrow to go into more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. We're now going to move into our first panel of the day, which we've called Common Challenges and Global Success Stories. And this will be moderated by Carolyn McCurdy, who's a water policy advisor who's also working on this project. And we have 3 great panelists, so I'll hand it over to you, Carolyn.
Yes, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, people. First is we'll hear from Dr. Anu Ramaswamy. She's a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Princeton University. And as you heard before, she's been a thesis advisor and a doctoral dissertation advisor to the previous speaker. Anu, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Carol, and the whole program, the IUS program, for creating this wonderful international exchange and for inviting me to be a part of it. So just as background, I'm a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Princeton University. And more critically for this ASEAN project, I direct a new center at Princeton called the Center for Global India. And our center is actually very interested to look at how India and lessons from India and lessons from the ASEAN can play with each other. So just programmatically, our center is focused on sustainable urbanization in Asia, more broadly speaking. And I'd love to be engaged in this project and others. I wear multiple hats. I lead 2 NSF grants on sustainable healthy cities. This is a large network of about 9 universities and more than 20 US cities, as well as cities in India and China. We would love to work with ASEAN cities. I also lead a new grant funded by the US Department of Agriculture on the food, energy, water nexus. So with that, I want to go to the next slide and talk about sort of 3 reports from my lab that I think are really relevant for this conversation. The first is I serve on the United Nations International Resource Panel. The resource panel is like the IRP is the sister organization of the IPCC, and it focuses on natural resources. And we wrote a report on sustainable urban transitions in the ASEAN region. So I welcome you all to take a look at the report. The second is this question about what is a smart city. I think we've opened with that. And I have one article in the journal Science in the special issue called Urban Planet. And the main point of this article, which is called Meta Principles for Developing Smart, Sustainable, and Healthy Cities, is that we really have to go from smart cities to smart urban systems. So I'll talk a little bit about what smart urban systems means and what that means in a shift of perspective. And I hope the smart cities concept can be broadened, which is what the point of our paper was, to thinking about smart urban systems. And then the last is the sustainable urban systems concept is something that we also wrote up. 12 researchers as well as practitioners wrote a report, an advisory report to the National Science Foundation, emphasizing this idea of systems. So let's talk in the next slide of what we actually mean. What do we mean when we say, what is the few nexus system exactly in an urban context? And I'm going to draw most of my presentations from this paper in Environmental Research Letters, which talks about an urban systems framework. You'll hear the word systems often, to assess the transboundary food, energy, water nexus. And I want to acknowledge all my co-authors. And the next slide shows the main idea here is that cities don't exist in isolation. They exist only because they're served by supply chains, which provide electricity, fuel, food, water, construction materials, and these larger air, rail, road, and freight networks. And so if we are thinking about sustainability writ large, we really have to think not only of what goes on inside cities, but where we source all our materials from: food, water, energy, and everything else. And as an example, Delhi, we've studied more than 100 cities in different parts of the world, and all cities import. Delhi imports more than 55%. This is Delhi, India, 100% of its cement, 90% of its food, 100% of its petrol fuels. We know food travels long distances. And so the main concept here is that you really can't have a smart, sustainable, healthy city if we don't study cities in the context of their larger systems, which is a sustainable urban systems view. And so what does that mean for the few nexus is the next slide. And I would request us, I'll tell you when to click because this is animated. So we talk a lot about resource circularity, but what does it actually mean? And how do you know and trace resources in an urban systems context? And what I'm showing here, if someone could point at the circle, is if that's your city boundary, you have homes, businesses, and industries within that city boundary. And within that city boundary, you have people, businesses, industries using food, energy, and water, because we're talking about the food, energy, water nexus. And you have the green in-boundary food production. Some cities produce a little bit of food in their boundary. You have in-boundary groundwater withdrawal, rainwater harvesting. You have in-boundary energy generation. But the reality is, for the vast majority of cities, if you click, that's just not sufficient. We need transboundary energy, transboundary food, transboundary water. And if you click more, that transboundary energy has embodied water in it. This is water needed for power generation, as many people have talked about. The food needs both water and energy embodied, and the water needs energy. And so that's what this nexus is. And this allows you to look at system-wide, meaning if you really want to address local to global challenges, how do we address system-wide food, energy, water, greenhouse gas, land, all of that? You have to take a transboundary approach. The transboundary approach doesn't mean you ignore what happens within the city. And so within the city, if you click, you'll see potential for resource recovery inside the city and exchange. And you can see, if you click quickly, you can see exchanges between different pairs: food, energy, and water, water, energy, and food. And so in this case study and in this framework, and I'm presenting it because I think without such a quantitative framework, we don't know what to prioritize. The nexus is a complicated thing. And this allows us to get a sense of what are the big things, what are the low-hanging fruit. And so if you move to the next slide, that's the idea that the system is not only transboundary and multi-sector. And in this paper in Science, you'll see that my research group, and again, if someone's able to point towards the sectors on the left side, we have buildings, the little icon for buildings. You have trees for green infrastructure. You have recycling for waste. You have food, the plate of food. You have the tap showing water. You have mobility, and you have energy. And these 7 sectors are so essential for all cities. But we take a human-centered view that people shape these sectors, and these sectors wouldn't exist without transboundary flows, which creates pressures from local to global scales, as well as opportunities for innovation. And so not only do we have multiple sectors that are transboundary, we have multiple actors. And if you look at the bottom, you see different actors. You see people within cities, you see businesses within cities, but you also see state governments, national governments, IPCC, UN, these are global actors. And each of those actors is driven by different motivations. And if you click again, the main point I want to make here is that the actors and the priorities they bring actually will guide what actions you pick, because the nexus is immensely complicated. And so very quickly in the next slide, I'm going to share with you this whole challenge. Yeah, what actions should we prioritize? And the point here is that the framework allows you to prioritize actions. You can look within and across sectors. You can look at multiple impacts, and actors and priorities will guide actions. Next slide, please. And so we did a case study. We figured out where Delhi gets all of its food, all of its water, all of its electricity. Next slide, please. We then showed the water footprint. So we found, if you look at this bottom left side graph, we found that Delhi produces only 10% of its food, about 25% of its electricity, and about 12% of its water supply. And so if you look at Delhi's impacts system-wide, most of it is happening outside the boundary, which you can see in those hatched colors. Next slide, please. We could also look at diets, and you can see which types of foods are causing both land impact, energy impact, and water impact. And so a question I want to raise to everyone is, can we think about behavioral shifts towards slightly different diets? And maybe that might have a huge impact on your energy, water, GHGs, and land compared to smaller things that you might tweak within the boundary. Next click. And so that's the point, that city demand and diets are high impact in boundary levels. Irrigation has a second order impact, which can be really huge, electricity use and irrigation. And the next slide shows you can do this analysis also within cities. So now you can look within cities and you can see how much energy is needed for food, how much water is needed for food, how much energy for water, how much water for energy. And you quickly see a lot of things that we talk about. For example, wastewater is actually so tiny over there. The energy for water is actually very small compared to the energy for food. And so you start to get this sense of scale. And like I said, you'll pick different strategies based on who you are, which scale you operate in, and what outcomes you're interested in. But it's always good to have this big picture of saying, if we really want to address the global challenges, how does local action align with local and global challenges? And we can review this again, but all I'm offering is that there is a methodology that actually allows us to have this dialogue. And I think I'll stop with that. The next slide just summarizes it. I want to open up this debate. What is a smart city? What actions should we prioritize? And how do we prioritize them? And I welcome you to email me in the last slide. And that's my email. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramaswamy. Going from sort of the global scale and we're now going to bring it down to a city scale. We're going to take a very practical level. The next speaker is Ms. Paula Cahoe. She's the Director of Water Resources for the San Francisco Public Utility Commission. And she'll talk about San Francisco, which actually does have an integrated system. So Paula, over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Good afternoon and good morning to all. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to talk about, again, what we're doing in San Francisco, as well as our larger area of service area. If I could go to the next slide, please. The San Francisco Public Utilities Commission is a municipal public agency. We provide 3 utility services: water, power, and sanitation. We deliver water to 2.7 million people in the San Francisco Bay Area. We generate both hydropower as well as solar power. And we operate a combined sewer system in San Francisco, which means we treat both stormwater and wastewater prior to discharge to the San Francisco Bay and Pacific Ocean. Next. Similar to many utilities around the globe, we face many, many challenges to continue ongoing water, sanitation, and energy services to our customers. We are impacted by drought. And as a matter of fact, we're in a drought today, unfortunately. Drought is a great concern. We are very impacted by drought as well as fires. There's a number of fires in the state of California. We have a potential impact from earthquakes. We do have a number of earthquake faults in San Francisco and the Bay Area. We have aging infrastructure. Some of our infrastructure in San Francisco dates back to the late 1800s. At the same time, we're seeing rapid new development, new buildings coming into San Francisco from a commercial scale to multifamily, again, increasing the demand and on our services. We also have challenges with flooding in the city. As I mentioned, we have a combined sewer system. And finally, we also have challenges, regulatory challenges about the need to leave additional water in our rivers and streams to maintain healthy ecosystems. What that means, though, for our customers is the need to generate additional water supplies. Next, please. So in order to deal with these challenges, we really recognize that we need a new approach. Our traditional approach is this linear approach of water in and water out, as well as energy in and energy out, and wastewater discharge to the Pacific Bay and Pacific Ocean and San Francisco Bay, as I mentioned. So this new approach, what we call is One Water, which is very similar to the circular economy. And it's an approach that recognizes that we have resource potential across water, energy, and wastewater boundaries. Next. And really what that is it's a framework about how we approach our work at the utility. It's all about integrated planning and implementation, and it really encourages collaboration and holistic thinking to maximize the efficient use of our resources. Within our One Water SF framework, our resources are, again, of course, our water, energy, and wastewater, but it also extends to our financial resources, our human resources, as well as our community as a whole. Next, please. And so I'm going to provide a few examples of what we consider to be One Water or circular economy opportunities that we've implemented at the utility. Really important one is harnessing clean power generation. We've been creating greenhouse gas-free energy as our drinking water travels by gravity over 265 kilometers to San Francisco. We've also recognized that within our city itself, we have the opportunity to produce energy by installing solar panels on our drinking water reservoirs in the city. And that certainly allows us to maximize the use of space in a very densely populated city. And on our wastewater, we have opportunities, and we've been implementing those to capture the methane gas at our treatment plants to convert it to electricity for plant operations. Next, please. We also have the ability to reduce water demands and create new water supplies to meet our water supply challenges. Certainly for us, making water conservation is a way of life in San Francisco. It's resulted in one of the lowest per capita uses of water in the entire United States. And that also enables us to extend our drinking water supplies. We've taken wastewater and we've treated it to produce recycled water to irrigate our large parks and golf courses within the city. And again, that replaces the use of drinking water. And we've also transitioned groundwater that's been historically used for irrigation and replaced that groundwater with recycled water and to take advantage of the high quality local water supply for drinking purposes rather than for non-potable uses and for irrigation. Next, please. And in terms of adapting our centralized water and sanitation systems, we've developed a new program that requires all new large development in San Francisco to actually treat their own water on site, to treat the water and to use it for toilet flushing and for irrigation. And this has enabled us, again, to adapt our traditional centralized infrastructure with these hybrid on-site water treatment systems. Next. We're also very concerned about keeping our city green, as well as managing our stormwater and realizing that stormwater provides a significant value in terms of enhancing our neighborhoods, providing native habitat, as well as recharging our groundwater. So we have a number of green infrastructure programs and projects throughout the city. It helps to prevent overwhelming our sewer system. And it also reduces our potable water consumption and redirects that wastewater from treatment plants. Next. I mentioned earlier that some of our resources that we consider is our financial resources. And it's very important when we think about these capital projects moving forward in terms of building a new wastewater treatment plant or a new dam, is that we align our capital projects to reduce the impacts from climate change and social impacts in our investment strategies. And this has led to us developing and issuing green bonds for our projects. And this in turn lowers the cost for our ratepayers. And since 2015, the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission has sold more than $2 billion in green bonds, making it one of the largest municipal issuers of green bonds in the United States. Next. And so in conclusion, our work at the utility is ongoing. We know that we need to continue to plan, invest, and adapt our infrastructure to address future climate change and future climate change impacts due to the significant uncertainties that we face in the future. And knowing that we need to continue to work on investing in our infrastructure, we need to integrate wherever possible water, sanitation, and energy. And today I provided a few examples. We have more examples at the utility. But with that, we also know we need to change our governance and our business models at the utility. We need to do business differently. For example, requiring new developments to treat their own water on site, to participate in the solutions to our water and sanitation challenges. Of course, it's important for us to maintain meaningful public engagement, and we have a significant effort in terms of communicating and partnering with our community. And finally, fostering internal and external collaborations and partnerships is really important, where we can share peer-to-peer learning. And I just want to comment that one of our examples of our peer-to-peer learning is our partnership with Ho Chi Minh City in terms of sharing the lessons learned from San Francisco along with the utility in Ho Chi Minh City through the U.S. Water Partnership and this U.S. State Department. And so next slide is my last slide. It just has information on my website, my email address. And thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we'll turn to our last panelist very quickly for this particular panel. It's Dr. James Moore. He is the Global Solutions Director for Cities and Places at Jacobs Engineering. Dr. Moore, over to you.
Great, thank you, Carolyn, and thank you everyone for having me. Excuse me, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Jacobs is a global full-service consulting company across the board, from everything from essentially visioning through planning, design, construction, operations. We have about 55,000 people in offices throughout the globe. I am the global director of our Cities and Places unit, which really focuses on cities, which is the focus of this event. But it's important that we, in terms of scale, we look at projects at the scale as small as, say, a neighborhood park, and as large as the, say, policies for an entire country. So a very, very broad scale, and enormous opportunity to integrate all the different areas of expertise within the company into the work that we do. So an enormous benefit to us in that respect. Could I get the next one, please? I'm going to start with a quote that we repeat over and over and over, and we've actually started to hear more and more people within the company. It comes from a gentleman named Bruce Mao, who's a Canadian designer, industrial designer, graphic designer. And he says, when everything is connected to everything else, for better or worse, everything matters. And in cities, everything is connected to everything else. And so we take an approach that literally tries to look at everything as part of our process. The next one, please. We talk about cities as systems of systems. You've heard speakers speak to that. And again, the resources available to us within our company give us enormous depth and breadth of expertise that we can bring to bear And in many ways, our job is to integrate that depth and breadth across the various technical areas. So we're always thinking in that systems of systems approach. Next one, please. And then and accompanying that, we have a series of tools. And one of these is a tool that we've sort of pulled together over time. We call it EcoPlan. An EcoPlan is a process that's built around the triple bottom line. It has 17 separate lenses, and you'll see an example in a second. So it's a process that we use. It's a way of thinking, and it's also an assessment tool. It's not a rating tool like LEAD, but it's a way for us to look at opportunities, to look at alternatives, and to sort of evaluate them, good, better, best sort of thing. Are we getting closer to our goals? Are we becoming more efficient? Are we optimizing? So it's a very powerful tool that we apply to a lot of our projects, and I wanted to bring that up. Next one, please. I'm gonna talk to two projects, move through them fairly quickly. The first is outside of Melbourne, Australia. It's called the Australian Education City. We did the planning and design for this between 2016 and 2019. It's about 450 hectares. It's a former agricultural research site, about 30 kilometers west of Melbourne. It's designed to be a hub around a series of integrated universities and research facilities, ultimately housing about 70,000 people and about 30,000 jobs. Can I have the next one, please? And throughout, here you can see the plan of it. You can see that it's got development on two sides and more open space to one. Sort of an infill in a suburban environment. Next one, please. I mentioned EcoPlan. Here are some of the lenses, and we essentially built the plan by looking at all of these factors and trying to figure out how to optimize them in collaboration with our clients. And if you go to the next one, please. What we basically said is, look, you can go for business as usual across these: energy, water, materials, transport, et cetera, all the way up through Australian excellence, net zero energy, carbon neutral to restorative. Where does our client want to land? Next one, please. And we did a process with them. And as you can see, they were pretty ambitious. This was a very ambitious project. You know, a lot of focus on net zero energy, a lot of focus on net zero carbon, and even in terms of regenerative. Next one, please. And so the approach we took, and these are going to go quite quickly, is we began to look at all these systems. We looked at them in isolation. This is the energy. Could you go to the next one, please? Water, how is that impacted? How does it work itself out on the site? And it talks to external versus internal, this idea of crossing boundaries. Next one, please. Materials and waste, you know, how are materials brought in? How are they recycled? How do they move around within the site? Next one, please. Transportation, you can see the multiple systems, how they get all integrated. And if you go to the next one, I mean, one of our overarching ambitions, right now, 93% of the mobility in that area is by private vehicle, and 4% transport, 3% active transport. And the goal was to really normalize that, as you can see across the bottom, dramatically reduce the reliance on private cars and increase all the other options. Next one, please. The idea of a cognitive city, and we preferred that to the term smart city, but this idea that this development would have sensors, it would have nerves, it would have brains, but ultimately it would be about knowledge. It would be about thinking as it operates and as it goes. And then the last slide really talks to, but ultimately we never lost the fact that ultimately is about designing a better place for the people who are going to live, work, and play there. This idea of health and well-being and how that integrated into the overall plan for the city. And then if you go to the next one, you can create a composite of all of these, and you can begin to see how the different systems begin to interact with one another, how factors like energy and water connect, how open space and health connect. So it was really an attempt to design almost from the bottom up, building on the information we were able to collect about these systems and how they might, the scenarios we were able to develop and how they might operate and compare to one another. This project has been approved. It is not yet under construction. There's some concerns about financing and other issues, but in many ways, it encapsulates the approach we try to take to a project of any scale, regardless of greenfield, regeneration, et cetera. I'd like to go to my next example, which is an urban regeneration. That's one last image, just some renderings to go with it. My next example, which is an urban regeneration project. Urban regeneration is a hugely important issue. We all know that urbanization is taking place, but there's a huge opportunity to redevelop and regenerate existing areas before we start moving into greenfield areas. And that's not just city centers and older industrial areas. It's essentially all of suburbia in our cities can be rebuilt and redensified, re-intensified, rediversified. So This is a suburban site, former industrial site in a very beautiful location. And the goal was to transform it back into a unique, distinctive new neighborhood, integrating it into its context. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the process. Go to the next one, please. It had 3 development pillars that we were told by the clients. It had to have a mix of uses and it had to have animated streets. The idea of park life at your doorstep, it's 200 hectares, 10,000 households, about 6,000 jobs. So it's fairly densely developed, but the idea was that everybody would have access to green space almost outside their front door. And then this idea of a creative economy, a place to make and create. So I think 3 very aspirational pillars driving this. The next one, please. And so in this case, we started with our data systems. We started by building a integrated data platform, a federated platform, where we literally encapsulated all the data about the existing systems, the existing site, all of the aspirational data, began to integrate that together into this common data environment. If you go to the next one, and essentially building what we call an integrated geodesign platform. And this is taking the best of a database, the best of GIS, 2-dimensional understanding of how spatial allocations, but also integrating 3-dimensional building information modeling. So it's a truly integrated 2D, 3D, even 4D platform. And if you go to the next one, and what it produces for us is very quickly, it produces qualitative outputs. What might an alternative look like? What would I see from this window? How much, what would I see from this direction? How do the spaces organize themselves? But it also, at the same time, and if you go to the next and last slide, it produces quantitative data. So literally, as part of the design process, we are able to measure potential outcomes. And that becomes a very, very powerful tool in determining between one approach versus another approach, one scenario versus another, one alternative versus another. And I would argue that this approach is absolutely foundational to any discussion of smart cities. Smart cities start with smart planning. And this is what we're trying to do in this example. And I think that is my last slide. If you go to the next one, thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion.
Well, it's an amazing amount of material that all 3 panelists have presented. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm being told that we are quite behind schedule at this point. And so I did want to give Anu a chance to mention a little bit about her, work in Delhi, a little bit more. And I wanted to ask her how we might measure success in implementing integrated energy, water, and food nexus approaches to air quality, water quality, and the quality of food that's being produced. So I wonder if you might touch on the quality issues as well, Anu, just very briefly from your work in Delhi.
That's great. So the framework that I shared, we've been developing for several years. And as an example, so what it requires, particularly if you want to address air quality, we have actually done this in China. We looked at the benefit of the circular economy. What happens if you use waste fly ash to substitute for cement, and you assume in a scenario that there's less sort of virgin Portland cement? What happens if you use waste heat from industries in industrial symbiosis, so you don't need to have new heating systems? So we did this type of scenario analysis for cross-sector interactions. And you can do it across city types because you're modeling a scenario. And then you can connect it to air pollution. So we looked at transport of air pollution across cities. So you are city specific, but you also embed the city into a larger airshed. And I think in our case, this was a paper in Nature Climate Change. We showed 60,000 premature deaths could be avoided from these strategies that happen inside cities. And so it is the framework of connecting what happens within cities, like I showed in Delhi, with what happens outside, allows you to look at not only transboundary resources, but also public health and other types of, like you mentioned, air quality issues. I don't know if that clarifies it. And then other aspects of health and well-being are related to, the basic access to food, access to sanitation, access to clean drinking water. And so there's always this, how do I combine the local with this transboundary which is happening in all the things, climate change, air pollution, heat stress.
Thank you, Dr. Ramaswamy, and thank you very much to all of our panelists. Those were fabulous presentations, and they will be distributed and put up online. We will attempt to capture some more time at the end of the presentations tonight. So I hope you'll all stay on. If there's any time at all, then we'll come back to any questions that there are from the audience at the very end. But with that, we will have what I'm told is going to be a 3-minute break instead of a 5-minute break. So please hurry back. Thank you.
Back from the very short break. But we have a wealth of information to share. And I would like to introduce the first speaker of this distinguished panel. Dr. Ambu Mozi is the Senior Energy Economist at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Dr. Ambu, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Helen, and good morning from Jakarta. And IRIA is a research institute based in Jakarta, but we are working for 16 economies of the ASEAN and East Asia. This panel is about bringing the voices or the insights on the Asia. And here the one thing that is the ASEAN, and it's a kind of agglomeration of about 10 small and medium-sized economies. The biggest success of so far ASEAN is promoting this economic integration. And this economic integration brought in large benefits to the community and also the people. But one of these important factor that contributed for this recent economic growth is the urbanization. And as previously mentioned, and this region has been growing at the rate of about 8 to 9% before the pandemic. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And this urbanization is the crucial driver for this economic growth. But this rapid urbanization also brought in different challenges that include the access to that energy and these water services, and then air quality problems, the traffic congestion.
Air quality udara. Jadi
started in 2018 under the ASEAN chairmanship of Singapore. And there are 26 cities has signed into this initiative. And we have been mandated by the East Asia Summit to study the smart cities from the perspective of theory, then practice, and then the policy interventions to be recommended to the governments as well as the city mayors. So I bring in some insights about our ongoing and completed studies on the smart cities. And if you look into these 26 cities and what their vision document says is, and most of them are looking for the 3 outcomes from this initiative. One is the smart government, that is more with the application of this ICT and the data, and also new data sets that is coming from the citizens. And second, the priority for most of these cities is having a smart environment. And that means making these cities more livable and sustainable. And particularly this air quality and this water quality. And then affordable energy has become a challenge for most of the cities. And the third thing is economic, and every city wants to be economically competitive. That is the organics of this competitiveness of these cities. And as per our estimate, the first tier, these mega cities and the second tier cities will be contributing more than 70% of this GDP. And so, but everyone is very competitive in inviting the investments. And so that becomes a kind of third and primary objective of going for the smart cities. Next slide, please. Here, I think most of these ASEAN smart cities, invariably where they are located. And here I show you some of the examples, and starting from the Brunei to the Vietnam. And these smart cities has been in partnership with private enterprises, particularly these ICT service providers. And that is a kind of a uniqueness. You can see that is the what type of partnership is evolving, and these are the evolving partnerships. And these cities has been partnering with these big data giants, and they can be located nationally or somewhere outside. And this is a kind of a new phenomena that is happening, and this public-private partnership for improved service delivery. And the belief in this ASEAN is that is they are targeting for a combination of ICT technologies and the technologies that could improve this service delivery. Next one, please. Then this is a kind of a common minimum architecture. And in the last session, we have been discussing about WF Nexus. And if it is combined together, ICT technologies, emerging technologies. Here we have a kind of common minimum architecture for a model smart city. And this is the framework for starting our research. And it has basically two domains. One domain is about the ICT technologies. And another one is this, our conventional technologies that need interactions among the sectors. That is the integrated urbanization approach. Here we applied, and here that is it has the social infrastructure and then service-based industries. And here we wanted to study these interlinkages and that is coming across the energy sector, and that is the transport sector where most of these emissions are coming from, carbon emissions, and then water, and where there is still the access to the water is a challenge, and this waste management is particularly circular economy principles has an important. Here we see that is the how this application of these ICT technologies can improve the service delivery and can provide the services. It could be a kind of a new type of services, integrated services at an affordable cost to the city residents. Next one, please. Based on this model and our hypothesis, and here is a smart city that is started. This movement is, we see a kind of convergence of three paradigms that is happening in the ASEAN. The first one is the, they say it's a green cities. It is started in the late 1990s, and then it comes the low carbon cities. And then now it is the ASEAN Smart City. And here the ASEAN Smart City focuses to improving the quality of life, improving the efficiency of the urban operations and the services, and the improved competitiveness of the cities. But all this while ensuring the needs of the demand, and particularly this urbanization is a kind of phenomenon. It is a curse, but it's also an opportunity for the ASEAN emerging economies. But one thing we found missing is the sustainability component, and that's why our study focused on the sustainability, and we developed some performance indicators. Next one, please. Next. Basically, this performance indicators are quantitative measurement used to gauge the city's readiness to become the smart and sustainable cities. And they also help to determine the smart cities' strategic technology choices, and as well as the investment priorities. So this is the objective of developing the key performance indicators. And so for these 26 cities, and we developed the, we collected the data and we applied to these indicators. So each dimension, and we have totally about 9 set of dimensions, and each dimension has 2 indicators types. One is the core indicators, and they can be used by all the cities in the region, but particularly as ASEAN members, or it could be at the globally. And then second is the advanced indicators. They may be used by some cities depending upon their economic capacity and the population growth and geographical situation. And that is the kind of a beauty of ASEAN. And here ASEAN is so diverse. We have advanced cities which has in access to the technology and finance. At the time, we do have a type of cities where access to the technology is available, but at the same time, finance is not there. And then we do have a kind of small and second-tier cities where all these things are needed. So basically, these indicators are helped to design and how smart these cities are now, with some basic references, and how this is future technological and then investment opportunities could help them to take this smartness journey. And these indicators are basically optional, and we consulted with the cities as a part of the capacity building program to choose this list of the indicators, about 70 indicators. And the core indicators are common, but these selected indicators could be chosen by the cities. Next one, please.
About 1 minute left.
Okay, this is one of these indicator type that is developed for this, how the cities could be transformed into low carbon cities. And here it is a case of the Singapore. And here we found still that Singapore journey has some way to go to meet these climate change mitigation targets. Next one, please. This is what these key performance indicators we developed for this regenerative circular economy. And here we developed a kind of 23 indicators at the national level. And here it is the beauty of this smart cities. Smart cities need to work under the national policy environment. And so we did the analysis at the national level, and it has been downscaled to the city level. And here we can group the cities into circular economy thinkers, circular economy beginners, and circular economy fast adopters, and as well as the circular economy leaders, where we found 3 or 4 cities has been leading in this movement towards this transition to the circular economy. Next one, please. This is my final slide. Is basically some of the points for discussion. And here there are 3 points that is a hard reality of this smart city movement. One, so far this ASEAN smart city movement failed to see as the long-term comprehensive national strategy to support low carbon transition to the low carbon and the circular economy. And but this provides some kind of basic enabling conditions for improving that new energy and the resource management. In this regard, I think US and ASEAN Smart City Partnership is a timely initiative. And second thing is the defining characteristic of the smart city model is the promotion of the technological infrastructure. And here it has to be combined. These technological solutions need to be combined in the key domains of energy, transport, and the waste management. And the third one is it has to be inclusive, and this smart city model need to be inclusive, and they need to absorb these emerging technologies, but at the same time, they need to develop a kind of a new knowledge, innovation, and the capacity building networks for the digital inclusion as well as the sustainability. And here, the capacity and capability of governments, the city governments, is very, very critical. So I stop here, and I will come back for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anbu, for that wealth of information. And I'd like to turn the screen over to our next speaker, Najeev Singh, Development Partner at Enterprise Singapore. Najeev, please.
Thank you very much, Helen, and a very good morning from Singapore to everyone that's listening in from Southeast Asia and from the US. I don't have a slide deck because I just want to spend the next 5 minutes or so presenting a new idea to everyone that's tuning in today. And this idea is the potential role of co-innovation in developing smart city projects. So how I'm going to do my presentation is to paint a bit of context on how the ASEAN has developed so far, and then to talk about the value proposition of co-innovation in driving and developing smart city projects. So for context, I was part of the 2018 ASEAN chairmanship team for Singapore, and one of the main roles that I undertook over 2017 to 2018 was the development and establishing of the ASEAN Smart Cities Network. So I was there from the start for the initial concept papers, the strategy papers, when we presented it to ASEAN, and then when we presented it to all of ASEAN's external partners. And essentially, we wanted to achieve two things. The first thing that we wanted to achieve was setting up the ASEAN Smart Cities Network. And for setting up the ASEAN Smart Cities Network, that involved connecting all the regional stakeholders. So first thing we did was to define what a smart city is, and the overall mission was to improve people's lives using technology as an enabler. And then we went one step below to identify who the cities will be, who the chief smart city officers will be, who the national reps will be, and then what will the platform look like, how will people connect and engage with each other. And we were largely successful at doing that. By the end of 2018, the platform was established. There was a regular exchange of ideas and initiatives where people would meet once or twice a year to talk about their smart city initiatives and to exchange their stories with other cities. The second part, and I think this part is the part that's more important now for the ASEAN Smart Cities Network, is how do we generate commercial viable projects in these cities such that you get more stakeholders that are involved to help support the development of smart cities. And by stakeholders, in this case, I mean the private sector. And why the private sector is so important here is because the private sector would generally be the more innovative, or rather the holder of the latest innovations that would be most useful and most impactful for smart cities. However, there's an inherent limitation in private sector participation because a lot of these smart city projects tend to not be commercially viable at the get-go. And there's a very important concept called technological risk, whereby the uncertainty about the commercial and the technological aspects of a project stop private sector participants from wanting to engage and participate in smart cities. And this is where the idea comes in about co-innovation. So co-innovation is a concept whereby your public institutions, so in Singapore's case, Enterprise Singapore, where I currently work in, is one of them, step in to work together with the private sector to provide some sort of funding support to subsidize the cost of developing innovative projects. So innovative projects can be in any spheres like smart cities. And more recently, we set up this concept called international co-innovation programs, where we work together with overseas government, and we provide funding support to our company. They provide funding support to their company, and the companies come together to work on an innovative project together. And why this becomes a win-win-win situation is because you have your public sector support, and what that does is by providing funding support, they will give their companies opportunities to internationalize because they're accessing new opportunities in new markets, and also to innovate because they're developing new technologies for the problem statements that they're tackling in those markets. So that's a win for your public sector. For your private sector, you get to engage in more innovative projects in new markets, and also you get access to new connections in new countries, because by definition of international co-innovation projects, you will always be working with a foreign partner to implement your solutions. So in that sense, their internationalization and their innovative capacity increases, and they're also subsidized, so they take on less risk because they get funding support from the government. And for local stakeholders that are relevant in this project, such as your research institutes or your institutes of higher learning or your domestic agencies in particular ASEAN smart cities, they benefit as well because they are the direct recipient of funding support as well as technological expertise from foreign partners, from foreign governments, and also from private sector players. So this is an idea whereby you develop a win-win-win strategy involving your public institutions, involving your private sector players, and involving your local stakeholders in developing international co-innovation projects. So from our end, we've been rather successful in doing it with certain countries already. So we have existing partnerships with France, with Germany, that doesn't focus specifically on smart cities. It's open to all domains. But now moving forward, we are looking to expand this concept to new markets, and the ASEAN region, this ASEAN Smart Cities Network, and also what US has been doing in the region becomes a very interesting alignment of interests and expectations in seeing how we can all work together to create an outcome such that there's good, public sector involvement, there's good private sector involvement, there's good local stakeholder involvement to really implement smart city projects that do make an impact and achieve the ASEAN's overarching mission, which is to improve people's lives using technology as an enabler. So I just wanted to use this few minutes to present this idea to everyone so that it could be something that we can discuss more in future, either via this platform or separately after, because I do believe that there is good potential in exploring this further to really implement smart city projects that would help everyone. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Najeeb, thank you very much for that presentation and for the co-innovation concept. We look forward to continuing our dialogue along these lines. And now may I introduce, please, Elizabeth Jung, Urban Development Specialist from the Asian Development Bank. Elizabeth, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Ellen. Good morning and evening, everyone. I'm happy to share experience of ADB with ASEAN Australia Smart City Trust Fund, or AASCTF. Next slide, please. Next, please. Yes. Also next, please. Starting with a quick overview, the project started in 2019 and is ongoing until 2024. The total funding amount is 20 million Australian dollar, or about 14 million US dollar. It supports ASEAN cities to be smarter and more livable by promoting adoption of digital solutions to key urban development areas. It also aims to identify scalable and replicable best practices ASEAN region. Next, please. Also next, please. Yes, please, next, please. Yes. With the chart, please. Bar chart. Thank you. The fund is now in the third year from its launch with three main areas of activities. Foundational activities, it develops concepts and task orders for selected cities. Implementing activities undertakes a technical assistance and investment grant project. Influencing activities include various knowledge sharing, training, networking, and capacity development. So some of the examples will be introduced later. Next one, please. Next, please. Yes, the city selection process took 4 steps. The first, a candidate city must be a member of ASEAN Smart City Network. And then the government priorities was considered. Then the synergies with the ADB country partnership strategy, lending program, then Australia Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade bilateral and regional programs were reviewed. We can run through that, yes, thank you. We can go to the next one. Yes, so 26 cities across ASEAN region were selected and categorized by the level of involvement with the program. For instance, gold cities do not only participate in capacity development or knowledge sharing events, but also stretch to the investment grants. Next slide, please. Next one, please. So this shows the list of task orders under foundational activities. You can get some ideas what kind of urban issues are addressed under this program. Makassar completed a strategic urban framework project in July 2021, so it was just finished. In Baguio City is ongoing with a smart flooding warning system. Quezon City has developed the first phase of employment service platform and e-learning modules. Next one, please. The city of Yangon, Penang, Battambang, and next one, please. Hue and Chonburi also initiated or are developing the task order that addresses their unique urban challenges. Next one, please. Next slide, please. In influencing activities, many different digital platforms were used to reach more participants and to encourage active participation. The project provided 9-part webinar series, each with 1-hour moderated panel discussion. And this one utilized a Zoom meeting and other tools to make interactive sessions, which reached about 120 participants per session and received very positive feedback. Next, please. Along with the webinars, a series of 2-page briefs were distributed online. The contents were linked to the webinar to give synergies. Next, please. 2 to 3 minutes video clips also featuring smart COVID-19 responses in partnering countries or cities were uploaded on the YouTube channel. Next, please. So all of these influential activities materials are, including whole webinars, are shared through the following social media channels. You can find the YouTube channel online and see all whole webinars. Next one, please. You can skip the next one. And next one, please. So the final part of the presentation shows the stories of specific activities that I described before with some lessons and innovations. Next, please. So ASEAN holds a datathon to encourage public participation in finding innovative, relevant, and scalable digital solutions for livable cities. The datathon received 63 entries, and each team presented innovative solutions on various challenges in cities like inequality, job market, also e-waste, and many other more. The winner was awarded with a $20,000 seed money to further develop the solution. Next, please. In Makassar, Livable City Toolbox was being developed to support the city's vision for the world-class city. The project was initially intended to develop a Makassar livable city plan, but it changed to adapt a stakeholders' need. So there are mainly 4 points that we did differently to the conventional approach in this toolbox project. The first one, the urban development scenario report, is an interactive e-report, unlike the conventional paper report. The toolbox can also provide digital visualization and analytic tools with the integration with the geographic information system platform. So city can decide its priority investment itself rather than adapting recommendations from project reports and studies. The thirdly, citizen engagement survey were collected digitally, resulting in 4,000 questionnaire entries and fitting into the database rather than a paper report. Lastly, collaborating with the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, or CIRO, the toolbox made a climate risk data more accessible to city planners, helping city to increase resilience to the climate change. So using this toolbox, the city can use technology to collect, share, analyze, interpret, and utilize the data for better city planning. Next one, please. In Kaisan, a digital vocational training platform, you can skip the next one, please. Next, please. Yes. In Kaisan, a digital vocational training platform will be developed. So this will include a job matching system and also e-learning module to the candidates who need to apply for the employment. So this one includes a gamification to make approachable to young generations. This new approach will prepare students for the demands of the job market, reducing employee orientation period, increasing business efficiency, and enhancing the economic growth of the city. So this is the last slide, but I would like to also share the impact of the COVID-19 to the implementation of the project. So there was quite a significant impact on the design and on the implementation of the program due to this pandemic. So there was a travel restriction. We were unable to host a face-to-face workshop and trainings. However, this actually turned out to be an opportunity to adapt the digital technologies and enhance connections between people. So now we are using Zoom meetings in our normal settings, and ASSDF tried to further digital tools to make interactive webinars. And also we had rather than providing a face-to-face training session with the English interpreter, we developed the webinar and e-learning modules in local languages. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you can also see introduction translated in Vietnamese and other local languages. And actually, this language can be a big barrier. We learned a lesson that language can be a big barrier to some of those in need such training, but unable to, it was very uncomfortable to access. So this online technology was quite an opportunity to provide different approach to people. And also conducting surveys online could collect more feedbacks from various positions and levels because it was anonymous. And I will conclude this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And now I'd like to open the floor for questions, both from our audience, our panelists. Please, any questions? We have some little bit of time.
Yeah, Ellen, we have one question here that came in. And this one is to Dr. Sperling and Dr. Ramaswamy, potentially. And it says, in ASEAN Asia region, the urban boundaries are in constant flux. And he's wondering, what are the strategic advantages for peri-urban areas and how the water, energy, food nexus approach could improve the service delivery for urban residents?
Thank you. Will Dr. Anu or Josh would like to take those?
Yeah, I'll try to answer briefly. So in 2016, members of the NREL team and State Department with USAID and several US universities and other global partners, we launched a concept around focusing on decentralized closed loop models that bridge across these boundaries of cities. I think knowing that we might double our urban populations from 2005 to 2050, yet triple the land and energy and other resources required, because land is often cheapest at the outskirts of cities. The boundary does seem to stay dynamic and in flux, but if we can provide for services, maybe in decentralized manners to locations that don't yet have basic services in a more efficient manner, there might be an opportunity space there. And at the same time, I think this is addressing a challenge where lower income populations try to reach the city for services, education, jobs. They live in the outskirts or in informal settlements where there's still a lack of basic services. I think we found we have about 1 billion people today living in slums or informal settlements. This could double by 2030. So I think thinking across that urban boundary will be important, and especially around the peri-urban areas that are often rapidly being converted from more agricultural to built up land area. And I know Anu probably has comments. I saw she shared a response in the chat too. Thanks, Anu.
Thank you very much to both of you. Carolyn, I'll pass the floor to you to ask the question of your speaker.
Yes, Paula Kehoe, if you're still on the line, I wanted to ask you about San Francisco's integrated system. These systems have been in place a long time already, and I'm just wondering how it was. Was there a whole urban planning mechanism involved to get you to this integrated stage? Did somebody see this, or was all this infrastructure built and then it had to be retrofitted afterwards? How did you come to be water, power, and sewer as an integrated system? What's the history there?
Great, thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, so we are a utility providing these 3 utility services, but in theory, we're actually 3 separate utilities. And that has to do with how we were set up, that we're 3 separate enterprises. And with the separation of these enterprises created silos, also a limitation in terms of our financial resources. For example, within our water enterprise, we're only allowed to spend ratepayer money on water projects. However, recognizing that we face all of these significant challenges going forward with all of our utility services, we needed to take a step back and adopt this One Water approach. And this approach really is from top down and bottom up to communicate to all of our employees that when we think about our projects from our respective utilities, that we need to think about multiple benefits. And those multiple benefits are either from existing infrastructure by adapting existing infrastructure, or when we think about creating new infrastructure capital projects, that we think about the multiple benefits that could be achieved through these projects. And so it was very important for us to actually step back and acknowledge that and establish this One Water policy within the utility to encourage these types of collaborations and partnerships within the utility itself.
Thank you, Paula. I think it underscores the point that has been made by several of the speakers that integrated systems very much also requires integrated governance structures. And we need to have multiple or multidisciplinary disciplines. We need to have the engineer working with the urban planner, working with the sociologist, working with the biologist. And we need to have the political commitment to go in that direction for the long term. So it is a complex process, but the benefits and the long-term sustainability is the goal at the end and the reward at the end. So with that, let me turn this back to Jeff, I believe, to lead us to the next session.
Sure. We actually had one more question that we have coming up, but do we want to address that one, or should we?
No, we can, let's take that question. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Sure, let's take the question.
No problem. I'll open this up to anybody, but Helen, you may want to direct it to someone. This one says, China has a new carbon tax trade program. Have any of the models today presented looked at the cost of the circular economy solutions and carbon tax?
This is, yes, a very timely question. I think many countries are considering the idea of a carbon tax. Does anybody want to respond? Panelist or audience? I see Dr. Anbu, maybe?
Yes, I think the carbon tax and the linking it to this current transition to the circular and the low carbon economy is discussed at the policy circles. But here, if you come to this region and the China, Korea, and Singapore, they introduced this carbon tax so far. And then other countries that has been thinking about is Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. But still there are different dilemmas. And this pandemic also has created a kind of new challenges, particularly the financial resources. The national debt of the government has alarmingly increased. So broadening the tax base is a kind of alternative, that is the hard alternative that is available, and some countries may be moving this year or the next year. But the difficulty is what could be the amount of the carbon tax that varies because still this
cái số tiền đóng thuế có yang ต้องใช้ fossil fuel พลังงาน fossil ต่างๆ
tersebut ini kerana banyak negara masih menggunakan petrol.
Countries are thinking about removal of the subsidies as a kind of innovative hybrid approach. But in the case of circular economy, how far this new revenue generated from the carbon tax will be recycled for low carbon or the circular investment is a question. And here they may be going for the other developmental priorities like a health sector. This is my observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to address that question?
Helen, this is Josh. I'll just quickly chime in. I have seen other programs that are not just a tax, but viewed as a revenue neutral approach, whereby, as one example, in France, they call it bonus malus. And so you're putting a price on the polluting option, but providing a rebate or incentive for the lower emitting option. And so that might be another type of policy option that might be of interest at different scales.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think for the sake of time, we are a bit over, but we have one final session, and let's turn to that. Jennifer?
Okay. Yes, great. Thank you, Helen. And I will close this out pretty quickly. Thank you all for participating today. This again was the first day of a 2-day event. We encourage and hope that you can join us for the second day. If you haven't registered yet, please do so. The content will be a bit different. We will be focusing more on city-specific examples and doing some more interactive discussion and polling. We would really love to get your input during that event in 2 days, so it's the day after tomorrow. Also would love to encourage, if you have any interest in the project and the work we're doing, to please reach out to us. You are welcome to join our community of practice, and we will keep you informed of our activities. I've seen several chat questions about sharing information. We will be sharing a recording as well as slides after the event. And we've actually set up a Google Drive where we can post additional information and resources that are provided by some of the experts from today. So we can share that as well. So again, yeah, hoping to provide many resources to you, including if you didn't see speaker bios prior to the event, those were emailed out, I think, along with your participant registration reminder. If not, we can definitely include that in a follow-up email. And my final note, we would love it if you would take a quick survey. It will be coming to you as, I guess, as the event closes here. Isabel will push it out, and we would really appreciate your input into the direction of this project and your feedback. We will be asking these questions today and tomorrow. So if you could spend just a couple minutes, we would really appreciate it. And I think, Isabel, I could turn it to you for that purpose at this point. And again, thank you everybody for your time.